Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 10th episode of X's and O's for the 2019 fall semester. Joe Thompson, along with Isaac Dienesten. Later on the show, we're going to be covering some FBS college football and previewing the Vikings-Seahawks for Monday Night Football, as well as a couple recap games from NFL Week 13. But first, last week, Thanksgiving break, we had the first round of the FCS Playoffs. Isaac, some shocking games so far.
I mean, what do you call shocking at this point? You know, there were plenty that were not. Let's get that out of the way first off. I mean, there were no real, big upsets. I think actually only 2 road teams, if I am looking at my paper in front of me correctly. Yeah, 2 road teams won. But I wouldn't call either of them necessarily shockers. Illinois State, they were really good in their game against Southeastern Missouri SEMO, 24-6. That was the James Robinson show. He basically accounted for their whole offense. So good on Illinois State. They advance. I think they have a good shot in their next game. And then the other road team that won was Kennesaw State and their little flex bone offense. Old-fashioned triple option. You love to see that. I at least love that kind of offense. I could go on forever about just the dichotomy and the breaking down of that type of offense. But Kennesaw beat Wofford by just a touchdown. It was technically that close because of a late touchdown. Kennesaw won that pretty convincingly for the most part. But otherwise, it was kind of a, maybe other than Southeastern Louisiana and Villanova, that was the biggest scoring output of the weekend. But otherwise, a lot of the other games were just clunky.
Yeah, I guess shocking wasn't the wrong word to use, but we're just going to keep going with it. But whatever, just take me through the rest of the game and see how they played out briefly.
Nova got robbed, though. Villanova, I thought, they had a good chance at winning this game anyway. I thought they at least, coming on the road, and they had a good shot at winning. I thought at least coming in. But Villanova got absolutely robbed. They took the lead on a long touchdown pass in the fourth quarter, but the Villanova receiver just barely pushed off a little bit to get a little separation, and they called offensive pass interference. They don't get the touchdown. They lose by a point.
That's a tough way to lose.
Tough way to end your season. Villanova was a top 10 team for quite a bit of time this season, and to not even get a home playoff game first, but also to lose on the road, against a team that barely got in. They had to win their last game of the season to get into the playoffs. Unfortunate there for Villanova, but yeah, the other games, I'll just go over these real quickly. Monmouth, Holy Cross. Holy Cross was probably the worst team in the field. Monmouth destroyed them. Albany, they destroyed Central Connecticut State. I thought Central Connecticut State would at least be better and hang around more in that game. Albany, good for you. They didn't even draw that very many people actually at their home playoff game, and now may be in some trouble with the NCAA.
Oops.
So, yeah. That's something to at least keep in mind for them. Austin Peay, huge over Furman, 42-6. Furman was one of those teams that we thought should, at least I thought, should have not gotten in over Southern Illinois. They just proved that against a Austin Peay team like that. And then the other game that I wanted to highlight before we talk about NDSU's opponent this weekend, Northern Iowa just barely scraped past San Diego, 17-3. And NDSU's played San Diego in prior years and has handled them much easier in the past.
Much easier.
So, yeah, it was like a 10-3 game in the fourth quarter. It was 17-3 the final. A lot of questions for you and I, and now they have to go on the road in a hostile environment. But, yeah, my takeaway from the first round, there's really nothing to sniff at here.
Yeah, really. Honestly, it's just kind of the teams you expect to win were the ones that came out in force, so...
Pretty much. Yeah, nothing else to see here. But, however, let's then, talk about then who's going to advance to the next round. I'll get back to NDSU's opponent real quick. So Monmouth won their game. They're going to play against James Madison. UNI, we just mentioned, they're going to go back to Brookings, where they just lost 38-7 not very long ago. And then Illinois State, they're going to play against Central Arkansas after their win against Southeastern Missouri. I said this on our show last week. I almost like Illinois State to advance to the quarterfinals. They would end up playing against NDSU or Nichols State if they were to win that one. Southeastern Louisiana is going to have to go to Missoula, Montana. That's a tough ask for anybody. Albany is going to go to Montana State and Bozeman. Kennesaw State is going to play against Weber State, Austin Peay against Sacramento State. So those are the other matchups after the first round of these playoffs. But now let's spend a little time at least previewing this game here in Fargo, NDSU versus the Nichols Colonels. Colonels is like Colonel Sanders is how you would say that.
Yeah.
They're not like the corn kernels, but that would have probably been more entertaining though.
I'll be honest, I didn't know Nichols State existed as a university until the bracket
They beat Kansas in football last year or 2 years ago. Something like that. I know they beat Kansas pretty recently.
I mean, beating an FBS team is no joke, but at the same time, it was against Kansas.
But they beat Kansas last year.
A win against the FBS team is a win against an FBS team, but it's against probably the weakest FBS team in the Power 5. But
traditionally, but they beat Kansas. So, yeah, that's what I knew about them. But anyway.
But I had no idea up until last week's show, I had no idea they existed. No disrespect, but there's just a lot of small schools that I don't, and that a lot of people aren't aware of. I think that's just the point of being human. There's a lot of things you don't know exist.
So last week in their game against North Dakota, that would have been a fun matchup had UND won that game. But nonetheless, Nichols ran.
That would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, but Nichols, though, they proved that they, belonged there, though, on that field with UND. They ran the ball 50 times for over 300 yards. I mean, that's hard to stop. They only threw 2 incomplete passes in the game as well, 14-16. So it looks like NDSU is going to be expecting to see a lot of rushing attempts. And I wonder if that's going to be playing right into NDSU's defense's hands.
I think it might be. The NDSU has been really virtually unstoppable all year defensively, both in the run and the pass. I think if you're going to be a run-heavy offense, that's going to be a major problem when you're going up against the Code Green defense, honestly.
Even though, yes, we do get the old adage, spouted out around this time of year, running the ball and ball control always does give you a good chance in these games in the playoffs.
But if you can't run the ball, then if you're forced to throw the ball a lot more than you run, that's a tall order. That's a tall order.
Yeah, so I would look out for that in this game here on Saturday at the Fargo Dome. Nichols was 24th in the country at running the ball this season. I guess that does include their game against UND, but they do like to run the ball for about 200 yards a game on average. But when I was looking up their defensive stats, couldn't find them in the top 50 in terms of total defense.
Oh boy.
In the FCS. So that might prove to be problematic going up against this NDSU offense. That might just be a
bit of a problem, just a little bit.
Because NDSU does not turn the ball over. I'm pretty sure this is not fact-checked. I would like to see a team with fewer giveaways in the FCS, though, than NDSU. No. They have this many, 5 giveaways the entire year.
None of those are interceptions, if I'm correct. Or maybe.
Again, I want one interception, but it was not by a quarterback. It was by Dimitri Williams.
I totally forgot about that.
Yep.
The one interception was by a running back.
0 quarterbacks for NDSU threw a pick in the regular season. 1 interception total, but one was by a running back.
I totally forgot about that. Yep. Wow.
Yep. So 5 giveaways this year for NDSU. They are a plus 13 in the turnover margin. I remember even being at a press conference after a game. Derek Tuska told us media members in there that the turnovers are what they really want to emphasize. So I feel like, just being able to create turnovers in an environment like this in a playoff game, that will be very important. Mm-hmm. Every game, at least at this stretch of the year, it's win or go home. The team that usually makes the least amount of mistakes is going to come out victorious. I would look out for the turnover.
That's usually how it works.
I would look out for the turnover differential, though, in this game. Nichols is not in the top 50 in turnover differential, so, you just have to take these kind of things with a grain of salt. You don't know exactly. Like when you go on the NCAA's FCS Stats page, you can't really take a look. You can't take a look at everything necessarily. You can't see where every team is in certain aspects. You can only see the top 50. So I guess the fact that they're not in the top 50 in certain things like total yards allowed on defense and in turnover margin. I think that should tell a lot.
That's going to tell the big story. We'll have to see what happens on Saturday, but I think that's going to play a pretty big role in what happens.
It's also interesting, Nichols opened their season against Kansas State. You know who coaches Kansas State now these days? Chris Klieman.
Whoa, no way.
Yeah, and Chris Kleiman's first win as a Kansas State Wildcat coach came against this Nichols team 49-14.
Yeah, well.
So,
yeah.
If there's any other telltale sign that,
maybe preemptive notions.
Maybe. At least it's a strong maybe at this point, but, I think that, if an NDSU, if a former NDSU coach can win that convincingly against a team like Nichols, I guess with 22 more scholarships, why not at least give, the current NDSU program maybe the same amount of chances?
Yeah.
I
would say
put up, maybe a similar scoreline. I'm only speaking in figuratives here because you do have to play here.
You do have to play the games.
So that's at least, what we're trying to get across here. We're just speaking totally in hypotheticals.
Yeah. Speculation.
The game is
speculation here, folks.
The game is going to be on Saturday at 2:30. You can see that on ESPN3. Real quick, before we go to break, let's just at least take a more deeper dive then into the rest of the field here. I mentioned all the games that are going on this coming weekend. Who do you think as well, could be somebody to watch out for? What game do you think could be something to watch out for this weekend?
I feel like even though South Dakota State may or may not have been deserved to be ranked, as we talked about last week, I still think they have a really talented roster overall, even though they're starting their second or third string quarterback. I don't know who's going to be starting in that game.
Might be Cannon Nelson.
Cannon Nelson
of Wayzata.
All right. So that's going to be an interesting game to look at. I still think overall, even though Jabor Gibbs has been out for the last several weeks since the NDSU game with an injury.
Pierre Strong also got hurt in the South Dakota game. I wonder if he'll be healthy. They're the Jackrabbit running back.
But South Dakota State is still one of the most talented teams in the FCS, so I think they'll make some noise. I think they'll be better prepared for a team if they win their second round game, and if James Madison wins their second round game. When they meet in the quarterfinals, I hope it'll be actually somewhat close game in comparison to one that we had a couple years ago.
2017, the 10 turnover game. So, I would
that was with NFL talent on that roster for South Dakota State.
Again, something to keep in mind. And then I would almost, though, consider maybe keeping a little closer eye on Kennesaw State and Weber State, just with the way Kennesaw State plays the game.
Yeah.
I harped on them last week about them maybe not even deserving to be here, but I can't say enough good things about the old-fashioned triple option offense.
Yeah.
It can create so many mismatches for an opposing defense. I wouldn't be surprised if Kennesaw State stays close against Weber State for most of the way. I would also not be shocked if Illinois State won against Central Arkansas, as I mentioned at the top of the show. And then the other games, they probably will just fall, as expected.
Yeah.
But I would at least keep in mind on those. Yeah, I agree. The SDSU UNI game is something to look out for. But again, there was that prior matchup.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Didn't look very highly. That does not look very good for UNI. They will have to probably open up a lot more eyes than they did a couple weeks ago in Brookings after that 38-7 loss. That wraps up the first part of episode number 10. When we come back, we will be discussing more college football and then more professional football from week 13.
The NDSU Bookstore, where every true fan and alum goes to get their pride on. Gear up with a variety of high-quality t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, and more. Made by top-of-the-line brands like Under Armour, Nike, and CI Sport to help you show off your Bison pride. The NDSU Bookstore has everything you need in your two favorite colors, green and gold.
I remember the moment.
I'll never forget that moment.
That changed my life.
At that moment, it hit me. This is why I joined the Guard. We're soldiers, always ready to protect our country. But we've also got communities. Family, friends, neighbors who count on us. I couldn't believe it. I just saved a life. Somebody from my hometown.
See what it means to be a citizen soldier at NationalGuard.com.
Welcome back to episode number 10. We're going to be discussing the happenings from week 14 in major college football. The regular season wrapped up for all the FBS teams last weekend. And as we have done when we discuss the FBS, let's kind of go over the top of the FBS, starting with the number one Ohio State Buckeyes. They dismantled Michigan again. For the fifth straight time. I guess they didn't dismantle them necessarily for the fifth straight time, but they now have won over Michigan. I guess, well, for more than that, but at least as with when Jim Harbaugh
Jim Harbaugh has taken
coaching
over.
Michigan.
0-5 versus Ohio State since he became the head coach of Michigan. Michigan has won, I believe, now 15 of the last 16 meetings, or 14 of the last 15. It was one of those two numbers, but it's
a big number, nonetheless.
It's called the game, but is it really anymore? Ohio State has been historically dominant over the last 15 years, and Brady Hoke is the coach with the last win for Michigan over Ohio State. And that kind of
really makes you think.
Really does make you think.
Really makes you think.
It also just shows that something at Michigan has got to change. I don't know what it is exactly, but something has to change, because you can have all these good wins, but if you can't beat your biggest rival at all.
It's funny, like, this game didn't have any, like, standings impact, but, I mean, you still have to win this one.
It's the game.
You still got to, like, be competitive and, like, not give up 50 points.
It is arguably the biggest rivalry in college football. You can argue with that for days, because they're two historic franchises overall. Ohio State is a top-notch program, so is Michigan over the course of college football, and they have hated each other for so long. It's been a really, really interesting rivalry over the past few years, but now it's just like, how many points is Ohio State going to win by this year?
Right. It ain't what it used to be. There were a lot of other blowouts that happened last weekend, namely LSU number 2. They proved that 50-7 over Texas A&M. Yeah. Clemson beat South Carolina 38-3. They pummeled them. And keep in mind, South Carolina beat Georgia.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened. And then
just a bad game, I guess.
Speaking of Georgia, they beat Georgia Tech 52-7. You take away
sounds accurate.
You take away the triple option, that's what happens, I guess. Georgia Tech was a lot more competitive against Georgia when they had Paul Johnson as coach. Johnson retired. They don't have the option anymore. Oh well. But at least we had a really, really fun game of these top 10 matchups. Auburn and Alabama, a shocker.
That was a wild game.
48-45 is your final in that one. A missed 30-yard field goal by Alabama's kicker off the left upright. The ball was centered, and it looked like it was going to go down the middle, but then it just completely did not go down the middle, hit off the upright.
I don't know what it is about Alabama kickers in Jordan-Hare Stadium, but
Cade Foster in that 2013 game missed 3 field goals,
and then the kick 6.
Their backup kicker kicked that kick 6 there,
and then just doink from 30 yards out, and then what really ended the game was when Alabama absolutely got bamboozled by Auburn at the end of the game, because they brought out the punter. Auburn brought out the punter to, obviously, what would appear to be to punt the ball away and give Alabama another minute or so to try and at least tie the game.
The problem was Auburn lined up the punter at wide receiver.
And that sent Alabama and Nick Saban into mass confusion. and they got flagged for 12 men on the field.
Yep.
And that gave Auburn the first down and the win.
Because it's funny, I even drew this up on my notes here just to confirm. Yeah, they had 11 guys, covering all the 11 players on offense, but they still had the punt returner on the field. So they lined up. They still had the punt returner on. They sent the punter actually in motion, and that's when they threw the flag for 12 men. They didn't even realize they had 12 men. It's so awesome. I love that. I love that so much.
I particularly love the quote from Nick Saban after the game where he said it was pretty unfair that Auburn did that, which is just the most crybaby quote I've ever heard from Nick Saban. It basically loosely translates to, I got bamboozled, and I'm annoyed that I got bamboozled. I'm supposed to be one of the best coaches in college football, and I got absolutely exposed by Gus Malzahn and the Auburn Tigers.
We talked about with the Houston Astros scandal what is gamesmanship and what is not. This is gamesmanship right here. Prime example of perfect gamesmanship.
Absolutely confusing the crap out of your biggest rival.
I love it so much.
It was amazing. I watched it live and I was like, oh my goodness.
Not only do I love it so much for that reason, but I also love it because Alabama is probably not going to the college football playoff
You
this
can't
year.
justify them.
Finally.
In the history of the college football playoff, has there ever been a team with 2 losses in the playoff in the top 4? I don't think so.
I think once, if
maybe,
any time.
But
I would
it's
have
very rare.
Yeah, I think once, but yeah. No, Alabama's out.
There's no, you can't justify putting them in.
You can't put them
in now. You
cannot.
With 2 losses to top tier opponents, and
you'd be a non-division champ
against
too.
ranked teams. They're not even competing in the SEC championship. So there's no way you can put them in.
They're not going to be in. So let's then transition then to those championship games. The SEC championship game, for the record, is going to be Georgia, the winner of the East, and LSU, the winner of the West. It was already determined that LSU won the SEC West coming into that final week of the year anyway. They had the head-to-head over Alabama. Not much you could have done there if you were Alabama anyway. So that'll be something really to look out for. The winner is absolutely going to be in, and I think the loser is absolutely going to be out, even LSU. If LSU loses to Georgia, I would think they are out. There's no way that you can justify, I think, this year putting a non-championship winner in over a championship winner, at least if it falls that way.
Yeah, which would be absolutely painful for both Joe Burrow, who I think is the absolute front runner for the Heisman, and Coach Ed Orgeron.
He's got a strong case.
And Ed Orgeron, who's done so much for this program, Go Tigers! Who's done so much to build that program back to its glory days when they had Les Miles and all the talent on that roster. But we'll have to see what happens. I mean, Georgia does have that loss against South Carolina, which could play a factor into that. And LSU has been dominant all season long, but a loss to Georgia could justify them not putting them in the playoff. We'll have to see what happens.
So, and also, if we do mention what teams are ranked, these are going to change tomorrow night with the official college football playoff ranking. So note that some of these rankings, they're going to be skewed because of Alabama's loss. Some teams are going to move up. So, namely, though, Utah, they were number 6. They're probably going to be number 5 now. They're playing against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game Friday night. If Utah wins, they are in.
Yes, 100%.
I think they are in because the loser of the SEC championship game, to me, is out. If Utah wins, at least they are in.
I would love to think that, but there has been some questions about the college football playoff and their bias towards the SEC, so we'll have to see what happens. But I think Utah absolutely deserves to get in.
Utah
if
only
they beat
wins
Oregon.
is only in if they win.
That's true. So very good point.
Yeah, they cannot lose and be in. They're they're on the cusp of being in the top 4. They need to win, and whoever loses in the SEC, they should be out.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised though if LSU were to lose, they would keep that number 4 if Utah were to also lose. Big 12 championship game, they also have a chance at sending a team to the playoff with Baylor and Oklahoma. That'll be Saturday at 11 o'clock in Arlington. And then the Big 10 championship game as well, big implications there. Wisconsin and Ohio State. I wonder if Wisconsin has a chance. They're probably going to move up in the rankings because they beat Minnesota by 3 touchdowns. But I don't know if it will be enough. If they beat Ohio State, they have a really strong case, honestly. they actually
But
have
then-
a pretty compelling case
yeah,
for the most part.
But then you have to factor in other teams such as Oklahoma, Baylor.
Other dominoes do have to fall.
Yeah,
but
I think
if
it'd be really
Wisconsin
tough. I'm
beats
not gonna.
Ohio State, they have at least a shot.
I'm not going to say they don't have a chance, but it's a tall order for Wisconsin to get into the college football playoff. And they struggle a lot against Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship
again,
in the recent history.
As we've mentioned as well, in these winner-take-all games, you never know what can happen.
Absolutely.
Don't take anything from the regular season into consideration. Ideally, at least that's what we should be doing. But, it's just going to be an interesting an interesting day of games. The only championship game that we're not going to go into detail on is Virginia-Clemson. Virginia is the 7th Coastal winner of the ACC in the last 7 years. So good luck against Clemson.
Yeah.
Congratulations on
Clemson has owned the ACC for several years now since Jimbo Fisher left.
Since Florida State fell off a little bit. Yeah.
With losing Jameis and then ultimately Jimbo Fisher to Texas A&M, that's been Clemson's conference in football, so that's meh.
So let's then move off of college football. Let's then go back into the NFL. We've talked extensively about this league on our show. What were the biggest standouts from Week 13 with a lot of exciting games on the slate?
There are 2 games that stand out specifically in my mind. One happened on Thanksgiving Day with the Bills and the Cowboys. The Bills went into Jerry World and absolutely balled against the Dallas Cowboys. Interesting fun fact. Dallas has not been a team above 500 this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a thunk.
And they still won't fire Jason Garrett. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they can't do that now. They're in a playoff race.
I mean, because they're in they're leading the NFC East by default, but
yeah.
But I think you got to let Jason Garrett go after this season, even if you make the playoffs.
It's funny. I think I even saw a report, unless Jason Garrett wins the Super Bowl, he's not going to return as head coach next season.
The playoff game that he won against the Seahawks last year kept him alive for another season, but Dallas has a lot of talent.
They really do.
They could be so much better than they are if they just got rid of Jason Garrett. I don't want them to be good because I'm biased, but Dallas could be so much better than they are if they got rid of Jason Garrett.
And then also, what was the other game you wanted to talk about?
The Texans. Shout out to the Texans. That was a huge statement win over the Patriots. They out-schemed the Patriots very, very well. Deshaun Watson, stats, passing yards-wise, wasn't too great, but he also had 3 passing touchdowns, and he also scored another touchdown on top of that.
Caught a touchdown on an awesome trick play.
Great play. Huge statement win.
Awesome trick play. DeAndre Hopkins,
the Texans, I think, are legit. They can take over of the AFC South over the Colts, who lost to the Titans. Yep. So it will be. I'm really high on Deshaun Watson. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he'll be a superstar in this league. We'll have to see what happens in the playoffs if they do make it, but I'm really, really high on the Texans right now.
That win props up Baltimore, who beat San Francisco to number 1 in the AFC. The Baltimore Ravens are now 10-2. The other things I wanted to at least touch on, the Cincinnati Bengals finally won a game. They spoiled our fun of having an 0-16 team this year. The New Orleans Saints have already clinched the NFC South on Thanksgiving. Unprecedented. It doesn't happen all that often where a team can win a division before the month of December.
Yeah.
And then the Kansas City Chiefs absolutely railed the Oakland Raiders 40-9. They are in firm control in the AFC West. Tonight, Monday Night Football, the Minnesota Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. A huge game for NFC wildcard supremacy. But if the Seahawks were to win this game, they would take over the number 1 seed or the top spot in the NFC West. This is a massive game with massive implications. How do you see this thing going here?
Well, when we were looking at stats before the show, we've noticed that the Seattle Seahawks play the other team so far this season very, very close. There's only a couple point margin of difference between
in their average game. Their average game is decided by 2 points.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they've been playing a lot of teams close. I think overall, looking at defense, the Vikings have one of the top offenses and one of the top defenses. Seattle has a good offense, but their defense has struggled at times. It is at home in Seattle, so it's going to be very, very. It's going to be very, very difficult to play with in such a loud environment. But I think the Vikings have a much better offensive scheme than they did last year when they played the Seahawks in Monday Night Football. So I think it'll be a much closer game.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a Vikings fan, I would love to see them pull it out, and I want them to keep pace with the Packers in the division. But who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, this is really a toss-up. They're giving Seattle the home field advantage and nothing else really in the line for this game. So that really should tell you what Vegas feels about both of these teams. They're pretty similar. Both quarterbacks play the game similarly. They like to, pass the ball efficiently and not turn the ball over. I think the turnover battle, again, in this type of game is going to be important. Whoever wins that game should win this one. Also, who wins the line of scrimmage. The Vikings already have a 1,000-yard rusher in Dalvin Cook. Chris Carson will be important as well for Seattle, but I don't know how they fare tonight running the ball. The Vikings have stepped up, even without players like Linval Joseph against players like Ezekiel Elliott.
It's always about next man up.
So that's at least, what I think is going to be important with this Minnesota-Seattle game. We hope to get this up on YouTube at bare minimum by the time that game starts. Thank you all for watching episode number 10. Next week, though, will be our last show as a duo. We hope you stick around for that one.